Hello techies. Welcome to our brand new video series focused on helping you get the most of your experiences in life. Before we start the video, let's know about Upptalk. Upptalk is a live, interactive platform for software training, furnishing robust personalities who could take on universal business platforms.
Why isn't it showing up? Where is it? Oh, I am only. I've filtered on this one as well. Okay, now it will show right. So here you see the all workers data source. What is it all about? The all workers data source. It says accessible worker as its primary object and returns one row per worker includes all workers, even workers to be hired in the future. That's what you said, right? That's what you already guessed. It does not contain any built-in prompts. This data source can be used to build reports on all workers. But is all workers an index data source? Standard data source, right? So old one. So nowadays, Workday recommends that we do not use all workers unless absolutely necessary. Do not use all workers, use indexed all workers. Alright. And then you see, here is another section which says permitted security groups. What does that mean? Permitted security groups? That means these are the security groups who are allowed to create a report using this particular data source. Only this particular security groups. Like for all workers. It's quite a lot, 453, so practically everything. All these security groups, 450 plus security groups are allowed to create a report on all workers. Okay, and then if I scroll to the right, you see that there are sections like data source filter, built-in prompts, and so on. Okay, and another permitted security groups. But this permitted security groups is for the filters. So that means there is a permission associated with the data source, and there is also a permission associated with a data source filter. So to be able to create that report, you need to be able to access that data source and the filter not clear. Okay, so the voice is not clear. Why is this game? But it was right now, it's okay. Let me repeat that. So the data source will have the data, and it also has a filter. So if you have to create a report, you need access to the data source as well as to the filter, if there are any filter. Otherwise, you will not be able to create the report. Okay, so this is something that we have to keep in mind. Now let's look at this one and next, all workers. This is the index, all workers, right? So if I look at this, there are multiple data source filters like this one. You see this particular data source filter index exclude workers from organizations filter. You see, only a certain number of security groups have permission for this data source filter. Right. So if I have to use it, I have to be mindful that I first have to get access to the filter. Otherwise, I will not be able to create a report. Well, with this particular data source and resource filter, right? So security plays an important role in terms of data source. Okay, now let me just remove this filter. Let's remove all contingent workers, index workers. Let's look for all active and terminated workers. Right, all active and terminated workers. Then we have all active employees, right? So let's compare these two particular data sources. Here we have a description which clearly says what these data sources are all about now. All active and terminated workers. It accesses the worker as its primary object and returns one group or worker. That is fine. Only includes all active and terminated workers. For active workers, all fields are of the current data effective date, if specified. Okay, here also it is better, you see. For better performance, use indexed worker data source instead. Right. So although it is a very specific data source, like it is only for active and terminated workers, it does not include future data workers, but still it says use indexed worker data source instead, because that is indexed. And it will give you better performance. Okay, and what about all active employees? This one says accesses the employee as its primary business object and returns one group or employee only. Includes employees. What active? Excludes terminated workers. Future hires at any workers on leave if the leave type is marked as inactive worker. Right, so only the active employees. Okay, it does not include terminated, it does not include future hires, and so on. Right. So depending on the data or spend before you actually jump into creating reports, spend a lot of time in this particular report. And I mean output data sources. Spend some time, analyze the data source, and then look for standard reports. Then go ahead and do your customer report. Do not just jump into creating a customer report. Take your time. You don't have to finish your customer report within like 1 hour. You get weeks to create a good customer report. Okay, so do not jump into using the wrong data source. Do not be too impatient now. If I look at all active and terminated workers data source, you see I mean for any data source it will give you the list of standard reports and custom reports that have been built from this particular data source. It is called down. You would see the report section. All the fields are there. You would also see the report section if you click on that. You see the standard reports that are built using this data source. Okay, you can look at the standard reports, and you can also look at the custom reports that are created using this particular data source. Right, but custom reports, most of them, you will not be able to access. You will only be able to access the ones that are owned by Logan McNeil. Right, but here are the standard reports you will be able to access, and you will be able to run it. If you have access to the data source, yes, you will be able to run it, but see. These are the standard reports that are created using the same data source that we are looking at, all active and terminal workers. So if you want to do some reference, if you want to see some reference how the reports are created, look at the standard reports. Okay, or maybe, if you have the access, look at some custom reports to get an idea. Right, and here in the fields, you have all the fields that are part of this particular data source. So do some research, spend some time, identify the right data source. Okay then. Go ahead and actually create your custom report. Creating the custom report is easy, but researching the data source, selecting the right data source, needs some time. Okay, so do not be hafting in choosing a data source. Alright, then we also talk about the different types of fields that we have in Workday. Okay, so there are different types of fields. One is, of course, the text field. Can you give me an example of a text field that you may?
Please do like, share and subscribe to our channel. For more information, contact us at sales@upptalk.com.